There you go. Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. It's great to see you. We've got a nice crowd to start with here. I'm Stephen Neely. I'm your co-host for the virtual Dalcroze meetup. My dear friend and colleague, Veronica Bileski, is here as a co-host as well. I will name her as that in the chat. And we have a really nice meetup. Welcome back. It's the new year. This is our first meetup of the new year. Number 52, can you believe it? We've met 52 times, counting today. And people keep showing up. So we are just thrilled. It's been a pretty exciting time recently in Dalcroze world. We just had the National Dalcroze Society of America conference here in the States, which was a lovely time. The new Dalcrozian podcast just released a new episode, which if you haven't caught it, we highly recommend that. And Anthony and Lauren are our dear friends, and we're so proud of the work that they're doing there. We have other upcoming events that we will announce before we're done today, but I think before we go any further, we should introduce ourselves really quickly. So our practice at the BDM is to take about 3 minutes at the top and throw everybody into a couple quick breakout rooms, which I'm doing right now as we're talking. And what we'd like you to do is to, when you get to the room, introduce yourself. Would you please say, if you're willing, if you're interested, introduce your name and where are you located and who do you teach? Or who do you wish you taught, or who did you used to teach, or who's your crowd? And then I'm going to call everybody back in 3 minutes. It's going to go really fast. So get ready, set, and say hi to your friends. Everybody coming back. Look at us. Hey, everyone. You did it. I hope you had a chance to meet some people and just understand a little bit of the range of friends that we've got here. I know we have people from multiple countries, as is always the case at the virtual Dalcroze meetup. We are a wonderfully international crowd, which has been such a joy to meet new friends and old colleagues from all around. And so welcome to everyone. It should be noted, especially for anybody who is new, that we usually bounce between two different times. In the East Coast of the States, we are often at either 2 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the evening. And that is to allow our friends in Europe and Africa to join us when we are meeting at 2, and allow our friends in Japan and Australia and all the way over there to join us when we are meeting at 9 o'clock evening. Our time is a morning time for many of them. And so welcome to everyone. Veronica, do you want to share some of these announcements, or do you want me to, to say them?
Sure, I'm happy to take some of them. Stephen mentioned the new Dalcrozian podcast, and so just wanted to put that name here for anybody who wants to look that up. And I'll put a link in here so you guys can find it. And we also have an idea for meetups that we want to do in 2023 called Lessons from Our Teachers. And as we were reflecting about how to honor everything that Lisa Parker taught us, she passed away recently. We just thought it might be nice to start a series where we pick one teacher who has really touched a lot of us and ask those who studied with that teacher and who knew them well to share either something that they've learned, a way of thinking about this practice, or maybe even a specific activity that is very much that teacher's essence, or maybe like their signature activity. And so stay tuned for that. It's kind of a big scheduling puzzle to get the right group of people together to all agree on one date. But I also wanted to point out something awesome that Christine Lundquist is doing to help, because we, among the planning team, know obviously the North American teachers quite well, and maybe don't know as much about teachers in other parts of the world. And Christine has offered to organize a meetup about a very influential Italian teacher. So I don't know, Christine, if you want to say like a sentence or two about her. You'll have to unmute yourself.
a sentence and someone that she actually didn't know her very well, but she was the one who, because I knew I got into Dalcroze because I was an ORF, and then somebody suggested doing a seminar with her, and she was already, quite, advanced in age even then, and I saw this frail little old lady, and I thought, oh my God, what is this? And then I was just so blown away by it. And she was the one who encouraged me to do the Dalcroze training. And I wanted so much to tell her, I'm going to cry now. I wanted so much to tell her that, I did it because I never thought I could do it, because I thought I'm just too old and I'm not capable and I can't do it. And I got my certificate, but she died just a couple of months before I got it. So I was never able to tell her. But I know so many people love her. And
will you tell us her name? Will you tell us the
I'm sorry, yes. Louisa Di Segni. And her last name is spelled Jaffe. And I mean, she has two last names. I don't know if you say Jaffe or Jaffe. I don't know how she pronounced it. But Louisa Di Segni, yes. And I think she was one of the first ones in Italy. Yeah.
We're so looking forward to that meetup and a whole series of others. So we've been working with lots of our colleagues the last month or so to start to organize which date is the right date for certain names. If you have a special teacher in mind that you want to make sure either that we hit, or that even better, if you'd like to contribute, to and even more exciting, if it's maybe a teacher that we would be less familiar with, please make that suggestion, and we'll be very excited to hear some of these stories and share exercises and ideas from some of our past teachers. Super nice. Thank you. Veronica,
Yep.
what do we got next here?
We've got 4 awesome masterclasses coming up. So Toru Sakai is presenting the soonest, February 11th and 12th, and I'll let Stephen share a little bit more about Toru's teaching. And then Aneta Pasternak was scheduled for 2022, and her class was postponed, so we're doing it this year. And then Cynthia Lilly and Kai Liu are also going to be presenting. So Stephen, why should people come to Toru's masterclass?
Well, I'll just say all 4 of these, this is an amazing lineup. I'm so excited and so proud that we were able to attract these people, every one of them. It's going to be so cool, and that they're from all over the world. Toru, of course, is in Japan. I met Toru many years ago when he was doing graduate study at Carnegie Mellon and working with Marta Sanchez. Toru then went on to be one of the founding members of the Dalcroze Society of Japan. And I don't know how well all of you would know, but Dalcroze is huge in Japan. There's a very big crowd of teachers who are working constantly, and Toru is one of the master teachers that's responsible as part of the team who's responsible for all of that great work there. He's a lovely man, kind of gentle, a little bit soft-spoken, and he's just a wonderful musician. He holds the Diplôme Supérieur, and he I think he has said that he's getting close to retirement. He's not, I wouldn't think he was retirement age yet, but he had hinted that to me. So only to say, I don't know how many more times he's going to be doing international things. And so I think everybody should really go out of their way to try to join us when Toru presents here in February. Aneta then is in Poland, who's very active. She's going to be great. Cynthia Lilly is one of our favorites here from New York City. And then Kai Liu, if you haven't met Kai, which most of you wouldn't, he is in China, and he is this brilliant young man who's a jazz player and just a really sharp, smart thinker. I'm just so excited to be in deeper contact with him. So the masterclasses this spring are to behold. Lastly, we just want to announce that everybody's allowed to go to Geneva. The Jacques Dalcroze's home school is still there. It's on the same spot, on the same block when he used to walk up and open the door himself. And every 4 years, the Institute Jacques Dalcroze hosts the Congress, which is just their fancy word for a new conference, a series of workshops. It's all very practical. If you register, they'll have you choose the classes in advance that you'd like to attend, and you spend all day, every day for a week just going and taking master classes with master teachers. Solfege, eurythmics, pedagogy. There'll be some opportunities for improvisation. There'll be other opportunities to hear people share their research. Veronica and I are both presenting this summer. And so there'll be some really nice things going on. We encourage everybody to support the IJD. And if you are looking for a nice excuse to go to Europe, this is a great one. And then lastly, we want to announce that the International Conference of Dalcroze Studies, which is about 2/3 sharing of research and about 1/3 practical masterclasses and participation, is being hosted at my university, at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And so for all of our friends far and wide, please consider coming to Pittsburgh this August. It's 4 days. We have more than 100 proposals for people to present, and they come from 5 continents. It will be a very international and I think a really very exciting gathering of many longtime Dalcrozians and many new people who are just playing in these spaces. Some of them with Dalcroze credentials and many with all kinds of other credentials in medicine, in therapy, in education, and all sorts of wide-ranging fields present at the ICDS.
And
So-
Stephen, the ICDS will have an online component. Is that
It's
right?
true, thank you. So if you can't make the trip to Pittsburgh, you do have the option to register as a Zoom participant, in which case you'll get access to all the Zoom. We're going to Zoom everything. You'll have access to watch all of the presentations, and you will get the same access as the people who show up in person, where you can go back and then watch the archives for about a month or so after it's completed. So all sorts of fun things going on. And Pittsburgh's beautiful, so consider coming. Well, here we are. There's a lot, but we got to get into it. Veronica, do you want to introduce our first, since I was just talking?
Yeah, absolutely. So we usually ask our presenters to share maybe for let's say 5 to 7 minutes today to open a discussion, present some things for us to share and get into more deeply. So Rebecca Hampel is going to share with us about spheres of movement. And then Dawn would like to propose a kind of her thoughts on this important debate in music education and how to, I'll let her explain it. So without further ado, Rebecca.
Hi everybody, I'm Rebecca and I have laryngitis, so I am going to follow one of the tenets of Dalcroze and Aaron Burr and talk less and move more. So today I am going to talk about spheres of movement as an analytical tool and a movement improv tool. So there are, some people have talked about planes of movement, and the spheres are basically just spheres that exist around you. And I use a sphere rather than a circle so that you have it completely around you. And I have labeled these spheres in sort of practical ways. You can call them whatever you'd like to call them that fits in with the people you're moving with. But I have found them to be very useful as a mover to give myself a vocabulary to be able to try new things, to extend, to limit, which is sometimes nice to be able to do as well. And it helps us as observers of movers to do the same thing, to provide for them opportunities to explore other things and other places that they may not have been able to come up with on their own. Everyone has their own movement signature, their own particular way of moving. And we as helpers of movers try to help them to expand that in different ways and discover more different ways that they can move. So let's start right off and stand up. Everybody can, if you can. If you can't, you can probably do this sitting down. So the first, there are, excuse me, there are infinite spheres that go around us. And I've just chosen a few of them for you to experiment with. The first one is actually can be kind of difficult for some people, and you need to think about this for the audience that you're using. I've tried to name it something that is not loaded with anything, so you could call it the intimate sphere. It's touching the surface of your body. You could call it your clothing if you have people who aren't comfortable with that. So just spend a minute feeling what it's like to move in the sphere of your body surface, your clothes, your hair. What does that feel like? And you can use other body parts to move on that space. You can try it with your arms or your fingertips. You don't have to move smoothly. You can use different dynamics. You can tap, you can flick, you can gently punch if you want. You can squeeze, all the different kinds of things. So spend a minute doing that. And don't forget the levels. Down, you have feet, legs. And some place that we often forget about when we're moving is the space behind us. So remember that. The sphere is like a big bubble around you. Yep, or a small one in this case. So try just exploring this intimate or this surface space on your back, on the back of your legs, on the back of your neck, your head. You could do your face, your throat. Yep. And then the next one I'm going to label is about a hand's distance away from your body. You can call that personal space, but it's good to be able to measure. It's about that far away from your body. So just spend some time feeling what that space feels like. It's pretty close. It's not way out. It's like you have a bunch of little hands, and it's just 5 inches away from your body. In the back, what does that feel like? You could do different kinds of motion in it. You can actually literally move your hands around. Don't forget your back. Don't forget levels. And challenge yourself to stay inside this sphere. It's not round right now. It's body shaped. See if you can just stay there, not come out of it and come back into it, but just stay. Explore opposites. And you could probably do this sitting as well. Good. And then the next one is about as far out as if you put your elbow on your body to the tip of your hands. You could call this social. You can feel that around yourself. And you obviously can do this with music. You're all able to do this. I want you to try this right now just to experience. What does it feel like in that space? How do you relate to it? Look at the sphere when you're doing it. See what it looks like. Remember down. Remember behind you. Make sure you try to stay inside that space that's about a foot away from your body, just in that area. And it can feel a little constraining, but it also is kind of liberating because you don't have to do anything else. And then you can explore any one of the myriads that are in between here. The next one we're going to do is an arm's length.
Rebecca, it's Veronica. 1 minute, please.
Oh, darn. Okay, so you do your arm's length here. You can experiment with that. This one is easy to just do arms with, yeah. So remember, you have legs that are about the same length. You can do that, yeah. So we'll speed through that one. The next one is the room. So the sphere now includes the room, and you can aim for all the walls. The ceiling, the floor. Experiencing that, doing it with other body parts like your head or your hips or your legs, experiencing that, but focus on that area. Then you can do your neighborhood, you can do your city, and then the one I like to try for people is the universe or infinite space. So everybody go ahead and do that one. Look past the walls of your room. Look past your city or your country. Look all the way out and feel like, because we are imagining our body parts can get big enough to reach that area. And we can even do it with our gaze or our back. And always remember the space that's behind you. So those are the very short version of doing spheres of movement. As a teacher, you can use them too, because you can coach your movers. Say, let's just be in the intimate sphere or the surface sphere, or let's practice being in that external one. You can see if your movers need help with something closer or smaller, if they need to expand themselves a little bit more. And it gives you a shared vocabulary.
Very
I'll put
nice.
my email, I'll stick my email in the chat. If anybody has any questions, they can email me.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thanks for working through a little bit of a rocky voice. It didn't sound bad at all. You did great. Thank you. I think next is Dawn. So those of you who have attended almost any Dalcroze event in the States would be familiar with Dawn Pratzin. And if you've come to the VDM, we've asked Dawn to share and join us a number of times over our couple of years. Dawn's one of my favorite people, and we're so pleased that she's here. Dawn has been chairing the DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative at the Dalcroze Society of America, and has spent the last year or so trying to think about the intersection between the idea of DEI and then how does that fit into music education global and Dalcroze attentions more specifically. And so we've asked Dawn if she'd come and tell us a little bit about what that research has brought. Dawn, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you, Stephen and Veronica. Thank you, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm totally confused about this. I'll put that out there as a beginning. It's very complicated and confusing, and but I've also been learning a lot and have a lot of thoughts and ideas. In fact, I was meeting with our diversity, equity, and inclusion group this morning. And they send their regards to everyone. Melissa Tucker is on that committee, and Marlene Yenny Maitland is on that committee, and of course Alex is on that committee as well, our executive director. We got into a big conversation, which we've had before, about the history. Some of that is the debate about looking at our past and acknowledging our past and being accountable as a culture, as a society, for historical unfairness, historical oppression, historical neglect, historical forgetfulness. I mean, and in music, we have that in our history. And so the push that we have in our history, in our Dalcroze history in particular, some words, phrases, behaviors, practices that could be construed as racist, sexist. So the debate is, whether we don't talk about that and, just move on and say that we're now colorblind and we're now, at a world in which we are inclusive of everyone, or do we look and own up to, be accountable? So that's some of the debate that goes on out there. And I listen to both sides. I participate in discussions and read articles from both sides. So in our DEI conversations, we have an agenda, we have a charge to make the DSA more diverse, equitable, and inclusive. And I think most of us would agree that we are a very white organization. Dalcroze Eurythmics has a predominance of Caucasian and a good amount of Asian participation, Asian and Pacific Islanders. We don't have a great amount of people of African and African American descent in our demographics. I think we have an increasing number of Latino, Latina, Latinx, whatever you want to call them. So what keeps us from being more diverse? What keeps us from being more equitable? And what is white supremacy and what is our participation in it? And again, I don't claim to understand it all or have a lot of answers, but some of the things that have influenced me, one of the things that's influenced me is a woman named Tema Okum. I'll put that in the chat. She and others, she wasn't the only person, but she's the one I look for when I try to find her article again. I looked her up. They published something called The Characteristics of White Supremacy.
Dawn, it's Veronica. If you wouldn't mind just not shuffling your computer, it just is making a lot of extra noise. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, because it's on my lap. Let's put it on the coffee table. Yeah, so the characteristics of white supremacy, one of which is perfectionism and elitism. And I believe that in the classical music world and in the Dalcroze music world, which comes from the classical music world, that there's some elements of elitism and certainly perfectionism, which some people say, no, don't stop that. We need to have our standards. We need to stay striving, and there's something about looking at the issue of perfectionism as it pertains to diversity, equity, inclusion that has kind of woke me up a little bit. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't strive. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't, that we should accept slovenly or not quality music making. But I find it helpful to reflect on that and how we hold ourselves to high standards of perfectionism and how we hold other people to certain standards of perfectionism and how that it's subtle, it's nuanced, but it leaves some people out. So I'm going to read what Tema Okum says about perfectionism. I'll try not to shuffle too much. A list of characteristics of white supremacy culture that show up in our organizations. Culture is powerful precisely because it is so present and at the same time so very difficult to name or identify. So the list of characteristics are perfectionism, sense of urgency, defensiveness, quantity over quality, worship of the written word, only one right way, paternalism, either or thinking, power hoarding, fear of open conflict, individualism, there's a lot of them. Bigger is better. And I think Dalcroze as a practice challenges us a lot of these, which is a wonderful thing. And I also think Dalcroze as a practice comes from a world where white supremacy culture is dominant. So it's just some things to think about. Perfectionism. And this relates to organizations. Little appreciation expressed among people for the work that others are doing. Appreciation that is expressed is usually directed to those who get most of the credit anyway. I noticed that within my own small gatherings, that let me get back to my Zoom here, that kindness and acknowledgement and making sure everyone is okay, that everyone gets a word in. I was in a group in which the people of color, the rule was the people of color get to go first all the time. And that was kind of profound as well. It seems artificial in a way, and it seems very contrived. It is contrived. But when I stopped myself from talking and allowed people of color to go first, it was another woke moment for me. So,
Don, I was going to give you a 1 minute warning a few minutes ago, and then I was just listening. Would you
That's
like
fine.
to maybe have 1 more minute to wrap up your thoughts, or do you want to pause here and we can discuss?
Yeah, I think I can pause here.
I know there's so much. It's like asking you to stop after, 5 or 7 minutes.
Yeah, and I'll conclude with the same thing that I started with, was I'm confused. But these are some of the things I think about, and I just think that being kind and inclusive is something we can do and will do all the time, and to fight against some of the white supremacy culture that we have with us, that is elitist and snobby and opinionated and exclusive. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate it. We have two very different topics. One is very much in our bodies, and then Don is asking us to think about how we relate to each other in the world, but in a sense like that happens in our bodies, right? And I was actually really struck by what Rebecca ended with, that the universe sphere goes beyond your country and your city. And I actually don't think these topics are that unrelated, right? Because Don is asking us to consider what are maybe the spheres that we know or that we've been kind of raised to see, and then what is there beyond, what are other ways of looking at the world, and how can we use I guess, so I'll just share kind of my reflection on this, is that I'm kind of left with the question of how do the tools that I already have, how can they help me go beyond my world? And maybe that's a question that I have. Yeah, what else do you all want to talk about or respond to, reflect on?
Alice? Oh, you need to unmute, Alice. Almost.
There we go.
There you
Okay,
go.
got to get the mouse to the right part of the screen. Great. Thank you so much, both of you. I've thought about that. In fact, Dawn, thank you for awakening these thoughts. How do we extend the scope? It is a very white organization, or group of practitioners, perhaps more accurately. And I know people have said, fellow Dalcrozians have said, the way that we teach is highly suitable for children who live in very disadvantaged communities. And I found that when I've taught in schools, both here in the United States and in Scotland. In Scotland, there are not that many African people of African descent, but they're still very impoverished people. And we have sometimes a way of reaching out to those students who come from very disadvantaged backgrounds, where there's the parents are working all the time, or else they're not working at all, or they may come from backgrounds where there are lots of drugs, and yet we can reach those children, and yet we're not really reaching them to become teachers themselves. And partly, I think maybe we haven't promoted ourselves enough. I know that initially Dalcroze was part of the program for Project Head Start. And I don't know what became of that. I think Marta Sanchez was part of that. And perhaps, I don't know, some of the older teachers, US teachers, would be able to say more than that. And perhaps we could even do some research on that. To find out what's happened to that program and what's happened to the teachers who taught in it. Can they share their experiences with us? Because it's a shame. I know I felt very frustrated in San Francisco. I was teaching in a school with a lot of happiness with the children. It was largely African American, and it was absolutely wonderful. But then the funding went down, And so I was placed in schools with a much more middle class or upper middle class background. And while I'm happy to teach every child, I think every child deserves this type of education, it would be good to say, well, why can't you have funding specifically for children who might benefit from a more active form of education? Why can't we be part of that? So that's my question. And perhaps, I don't know if that's addressing what you were talking about, Dawn, but I feel that, we have a lot to offer.
Very good. Thank
Yeah,
you, Alice. Actually, I don't know if Judy Cagley is in the screen or not. Oh, she is here. Judy Cagley, who you maybe can see on your screen, was one of the original Head Start teachers.
Right.
That program with Marta Sanchez was started in Pittsburgh. And maybe Judy wants to say, Judy, we should have you back for a whole specific event to share about this. So you don't have 5 minutes, but you have 30 seconds to tell us a little bit about Head Start in Pittsburgh, and we'll have you back. You have to unmute to say hi. This is my dear friend and master elementary educator, Judy Cagley.
Thank you. I was sort of the second generation going in. The whole thing started when in John F. Kennedy's, when in his administration. So it started in 1965 with some very creative funding. Stanley Levin of the Pittsburgh Public Schools felt that this was a way that this just avalanche of tsunami of money was coming in. And how could we use it best? Marta Sanchez was instrumental in starting it with him. Hilda Schuster came in from New York, or sent people from New York to train the first cohort of teachers. And Annabelle Joseph was one of those teachers. I came on in 1969 as part of that program. And the funding dried up in 1976. So it went through a lot of iterations and changes, but we were right on the front line, and it was a wonderful experience. Of those children of all different races, but of disadvantage, were what you see is what you get, kids, and they loved to, the rubber meets the road, if you want to use all these cliches, but it was real. And one of the reasons that it dried up was because they did not start out by documenting changes. They couldn't prove that being in Head Start, having eurythmics would make you a better reader. Not that that was really the reason we were doing that, but that was one of the problems. They were teaching apples and testing oranges, and that has happened throughout my experience with these innovative programs, that they don't really accept them at face value for what are we really getting from this. So yes, I could go on for a long time. I would love to, but it was a wonderful, that experience was unbeatable for learning how to work with children and learning who children really were, because there was no pretense that we were right there together. So
Thank you
that's
so
what I
much. Thanks, Judy. And we will definitely have you back. We'll try to get Natalie to join us too. And I don't know who else we can get to come, but a number of those teachers are very much still around, and we would love to have them. I would just like to share one little bit about Rebecca's thing. I too was really impressed with the universe end of that. The beginning part of it is, I've not ever heard it described in those words of spheres, but the first half of what you presented, Rebecca, is reminiscent of a couple other ways that we try to help people just be aware that they are, and that they have a body, and we trying to break it down in a way where we can sort of then use that as fodder for improvisation or just understanding or exploration and all of that. But when you got to things that were like, yeah, but what about what's through the wall? That actually isn't, in my experience, that's not often been part of that conversation, which is a really both beautiful and really interesting set of ideas is how we might sort of forecast ourselves as able to see that far. So I think the first thing that I really loved about it is that the way you worded it acted as though everybody in the room is able to see through the wall, and of course you can observe your role in the universe. So we describe that to a student of any age, younger or older. That's not a common assumption, and yet what it opens when we sort of word it in a way that they can. If any of you have hung out with me long enough, you've heard me make this quote. I actually found it while we were waiting. I'll quickly throw it on the screen for you here. This is from a book called The Master and His Emissary by Ian McGilchrist. And what I want you to see here is this idea about longing. And so he talks about the word longing coming from the Old Saxon. There's the word, and it's not I long for, but literally it longs me. And so when a person says I'm longing for a thing, it's that it has to do with the desire for a union between me and the other. So when I'm sad because I'm longing for something, it's not that I'm sad that there's an emptiness, but rather that I'm trying to create connection. I'm trying to literally lengthen myself to connect with the other. So rather than thinking of longing as this sort of sadness, instead we might think of longing as the ability or the desire to actually make myself long enough that I could reach the other. We can share this with you all, but when you were talking about being into the universe side, or even just seeing through the wall, it reminded me of this same notion that there's more than one way of sort of feeling connected with the with the world that's around us. And so that was the little bit that gave me. I'll give you all the link to the book here in the chat. Who else has something?
Could I say something about that, Stephen?
Please, Rebecca.
One of the things that was really powerful, I found that stuff powerful as well. The personal movement has, as you said, we've done. But one of the things that was really powerful for me in this practice was that I'm not still being here and reaching out. That's one way. But because we can imagine, we can become and encompass all of those places. So we can move within our room, we can be as large as the room. And that enables us from a movement perspective and from a sort of energy and inclusiveness perspective to maybe feel more of each other in that space, or be more aware of it, because we can imagine ourselves larger than we are.
I love that.
And that connects to the DEI world in a lot of ways. That's great, Rebecca. Thank you.
I think Francoise has her hand raised.
Yes, I find it both very interesting, and I'm thinking of something that relates to what Rebecca said and also Don. It's that if we close our eyes and we just make sounds together, and we take the real time to listen everywhere in our body, how it sounds, how we can really share the same sound. We can be colored or not colored, men, women, or anybody. I mean, it doesn't play any role, because when we are together and closing our eyes, we can feel the humanity of all the people, and we can also feel the distance. We can feel almost the universe. I mean, we can really extend ourselves very far away, and that makes everything come together. I don't know if it's clear, but it reminds me to my other job as a listener. Yes.
It's so good. The couple of times I've talked with Dawn about some of this agenda and getting into the conversation, we've had no trouble pointing out both sides of some of that. On the one hand, obviously there's all sorts of systemic oppression and short-sightedness and built systems that are really stacked against all kinds of societies. And then on the other side, it's also not too hard to think, oh, but as Dalcrozians, we have all sorts of ways that we're trying to center every child that is in the room, or every body that is in the room, and give opportunity for them to lead and for them to offer something of themselves, and exercises like Francoise is describing, where when we can close our eyes and close off, and to just be there, then there is no way to sort of show differences. And so trying to come up with the right way to describe that balance, I think, is a real challenge, and finding ways to not use, like, to say, oh, well, everybody gets to lead, and so you're all powerful, as though that's enough, is a really tricky scenario as well. And so I think that it's been really wonderful that the DSA here in the States has been working on these ideas just to have an open conversation, and then as you know, as ways for all of us to be more informed and more aware in our own teaching, whoever our student bodies are. We've got still a nice little bit of time and such a nice group. Who else has something to offer for either of these sets of ideas? Sylvia.
Just looking at what Don wrote about taking a humble position about the integration of music and movement, and with respect to thinking about bringing Dalcroze, our community bringing Dalcroze to underprivileged kids. And Don, one of the things that I was thinking when you were speaking was like, from what I understand about the history of music and movement in other parts of the world, like Émile Jacques Dalcroze did what he did because music and movement had become totally separated. And some of the cultures in places that there are communities that are underprivileged in the United States, for example, that never became split in that way. And so in a way, the origin of this is coming from addressing that split of music and movement in a white culture, in a white society, and like addressing a problem that existed in that space. And maybe that's not a problem that exists in the continuity of culture, in a culture where music and movement are completely linked, but that maybe it becomes relevant when people who are, you know, descended from that culture find themselves in places that, in communities that break that continuity in some way. I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say, but those are some things that I thought about when I heard those things.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. Just under 10 minutes. Would anyone like to add or ask a little bit more on either of these? Catherine?
Yeah, I just want to say to both to Dawn and to Sylvia, I've always been afraid to say this in any of these discussions, but my first reaction is always, why would they want what we have? They being, as Sylvia said, these cultures. And I've taught kids, or I've been driving through neighborhoods, and there's these kids, and they're singing this amazing harmony. I don't know how they do it. I wish I could do that. So I just want to say thank you for sort of breaking that subject open, so I felt free to say that. So that's it. Thank you. Oops, wrong thing.
There you go. Yes, Francoise.
Rebecca, I would just like to write what you said about the name of those spheres. It goes a little bit fast for me in English. You were talking about first the intimate sphere, which is when you're touching your body. Is that?
Yes, you can call it intimate, or you can call it surface or your clothing. Intimate is sometimes a connotation for some people in certain groups that might be a little hard to get through. So you really have to know who you're talking to. So I try to make it make it sort of separate in a weird way. So surface, like hand, elbow to fingertip, and arm's length.
Yes.
And things that are tangible. The room. I can send these out to the group too if you want.
That's fine. Yes, I will remember. Thank you.
Yeah.
What else? What's it making you think of?
I actually have a question or
Yeah,
a thought
Rebecca.
that I had. And I don't know if this is cracking open something else, but I've had the pleasure of being in a lot of different studios, a lot of different people teaching. And one thing that I thought about with this conversation is our repertoire that we use in this work is largely Western classical music. And I kind of wonder I may not be that I just haven't experienced other people doing it, but I wonder if there's a way that we could integrate that into helping, sort of in connection with what Catherine was saying, and utilizing other kinds of music or other styles of notation or other kinds of things to be able to incorporate and include other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I think repertoire is some of the easiest things that can be done. Depending on who your teacher is, like Herb Henke was just known for having folk songs from every corner of the world that he included in his teaching. Not all of it written out in Western notation. There are all sorts of things. I think that actually, to me, that's the low-hanging fruit. Easiest changes to be made is just take a look at your listing. What's the music you're teaching with? And if you're only improvising, then maybe there's not such a thing. I mean, maybe that's not the thing to worry about other than acknowledging your own role in the room. But if you are including repertoire as part of your work, then that's the easiest to say. Who are all these people and why do they all look the same? And then the harder part, I think, for most of us has to do with what is my role in this room and who has power, who has voice, whose opinions matter, and how do we decenter some of ourselves and recenter some of the others that are in the space. And actually, again, I really think that the Dalcroze methods are right there. Like, we should be able to pull some of this off easier than many practices, and yet without having that kind of awareness, you maybe don't see it through those lenses. Who else? We've got time for probably just one or two more thoughts.
I have
Hi,
so
Emma.
many.
This is one of our dear friends and co-hosts, Emma Shubin. Go ahead, Emma.
Lisa Parker and I used to speak a lot about this, not in direct ways, but in ways about talking about how to diversify what the students received in their ears and in their bodies within a classroom, and what a wealth recorded music could bring, but also what to do when you arrive at a teaching space that is not what you expect. Somebody hires you to come in, and how do you work with no piano and a group of 100 people? She had some examples of her own travels where she was hired to be a guest. Her daughter was living as a missionary at the time in Kenya, and she had several workshops to give, and she arrived and there was no piano. And this kind of brings up for me this question of, we have a certain bias built into what we do in some of the traditional ways that we train, which is that everybody has the access to a certain amount of keyboard education, the wealth to be able to progress at a certain level and certain rate with that instrument alongside their other studies, and that everywhere they go, those things will be available, and that you'd be able to even play recorded music if it was there, et cetera, et cetera. So I myself have wanted to find more ways that I could bring different sounds into my classrooms and different ways to access music that is not the same pathway through my improvisation of the piano, but there might be other avenues with which to be as effective and as enriching, and then also as aware that I'm trying to inspire students who may not have the same access to education if they want to become a Dalcroze teacher someday, and this has been such a meaningful experience to them, and they haven't been taking certain types of trainings from the time that they're 5 or 10 years old. What is possible for them, and does that make them any less or more, et cetera? And so, like, a lot of those questions I really sit with, and I don't have any answers, but I'm hoping that as a community we can diversify how we do what we do so that we continue to grow and thrive and meet people in their communities.
Thank you so much. We'll pause it here, but we hope to see you back at another meetup. I think we have another meetup in about 2 weeks. So we're excited to share with you our new topics there. And also, if you have any thoughts that are lingering from today's discussion and want to bring them up at a future meetup, please feel free. We're always so happy to continue these conversations. Remember to sign up for Toru's masterclass in about 3 weeks, and we'll see you all very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Please come
Thank
back
you
soon.
all.
So great to see everybody.